Hello, and welcome to the Disability Myth. My name is Dominic, and I live with a fatal disease called spinal muscular atrophy. Together, my amazing caretaker, co-host, and best friend, Uriel, and I plan to debunk misconceptions, share our personal experiences, and shatter your expectations. But we're not stopping there. We're bringing in experts, thought leaders, and everyday people who are smashing through societal barriers, paving the way for a more inclusive world. Whether you're tuning in to learn, empathize, or simply to be entertained, the show promises to be an eye-opening experience that transcends boundaries. Because when it comes down to it, what makes us different is what makes us extraordinary.
Welcome back to another episode of the Disability Myth. I am, of course, your handsome and humble host, Dominic Trevathan. Alongside me, as usual, the equally handsome and humble Uriel. And today, we
Yay.
have yet again another amazing guest to talk with in Chelsee Fuerch. And Chelsee is going to help us talk about this idea or the myth that the relationships between caregivers and patients are always professional in nature. Now, in my experience, this myth is especially inaccurate because it assumes the patient caregiver relationship is rather cut and dry, when in reality, a lot of the time, these types of relationships are a lot more intimate in nature, just due to the level of care provided by a caregiver. And so, yeah, before we kind of get into the meat of the episode, the topic, I figured we'd get to know Chelsee a little bit. So, Chelsee, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Anything around like career goals, hobbies, favorite food, music, all that good stuff?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Santa Maria, California, on the lovely Central Coast. School, I graduated after I graduated high school, I transferred to my local community college where I ended up getting my associates in art for transfer. At that point, I still didn't really know kind of like what I wanted to do or what I really liked. And so at my time there, I had taken a Psych 101 class and I really enjoyed it and just learning about the human brain and the way that it operates and kind of like why people kind of do the things they do. And so I just decided to go with psychology. So I then transferred to Cal State Channel Islands in Camarillo, where I got my undergrad in psychology. And I really enjoyed my time there. While I was a student there, I worked in the Career Center, and that was a lot of fun for me. It was brand new, never really done any kind of work like that. And I really enjoyed just working with the students and working with like other counselors and being able to kind of educate other students in kind of job search, resume, stuff like that was a lot of fun. And so after I graduated, I kind of thought that that was the path I would take until literally like a month later after I graduated, I got into my car accident. And I guess I can kind of just like jump into that and go into that for a little bit,
Yeah,
if
please
that's
do.
okay.
Yeah, no, definitely go for it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just crazy like how it happened. It was honestly like exactly a month after I graduated college, and so I was the passenger in a car accident in Los Olivos, which is pretty close to where I live now. My friend was driving at the time and just lost control of the vehicle, and I ended up breaking my neck, and I sustained a cervical spinal cord injury. So I broke my C3 vertebrae to my C6 vertebrae, and was instantly paralyzed from the chest down, and was later diagnosed as a C4 complete quadriplegic. Um, and yeah, I was flown to Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital where I was in the ICU over there for about a month and a half. I was ventilator dependent for probably about like two and a half months after my injury. And after the ICU, I transferred over to Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. And that's where I did my respiratory rehab as well as acute rehab. When I first transferred over there, my lungs were like in really, really bad shape. And I had to do a bunch of different like breathing treatments to get my lungs stronger and stuff. And so I was still on the ventilator at that point. But I was starting to cap my trach to try to speak, and I started to eat like ice chips and different little things like that. So I was slowly improving. And by the time I got out of the hospital there, I got my trach out literally like a week before I got out of the hospital, which I was super stoked about. I didn't think that I was going to get my trach out. I thought I was going to have to go home with it. And I was really nervous about that just in general. Yeah, I'm like going off on a rant. But yeah, after I got out of the hospital, my life just completely took a turn and was, yeah, just insanely different from the life I was living before.
Yeah, I can imagine. If you don't mind me kind of jumping in and asking,
Yeah.
Obviously I have a trach, and when I first got it, I was like 13 years old, and it was following a spinal fusion operation I had to correct the scoliosis in my spine. So in the process of recovering from my operation, I was on the ventilator 24/7, like intubated through my mouth. And they would try to like extubate me, try to get me to like wean off the ventilator and breathe on my own. But every time I would try to breathe on my own without assistance, my O2 stat would just drop like to the low 90s and below. And so ultimately they decided to put the trach in me for that reason. I can't remember exactly how far away the tracheostomy implementation was from my actual spinal fusion operation. I want to say it was like a week or two later. But, I just remember the pain in my neck around the area of the trach. And the only way I can describe it is like it just felt like somebody had stabbed me in the throat. Would you feel like it's a similar experience on your end?
Oh yeah. It was terrible. I forgot to mention. I mean, I was drugged up quite a bit on a bunch of different pain meds when I was first in the ICU. But I recall, I think I got the tracheostomy surgery done, um, probably like 3 or 4 days later after I was in the hospital, just because of the
Mhm.
damage that the ventilator, was doing to my throat and
Mm.
everything like that. I know you can't keep it in for a certain amount of time or something, so they ended up performing that surgery on me. And I remember initially, like when I woke up, of course I was still drugged up, but I remember just being relieved that like my mouth was just so sore from having that tube go through my mouth all the way down my throat. And I just remember like my throat being really sore in my mouth and having some relief in those different parts. But just like you said, where the trach was, it's such an interesting feeling because there's nothing like it. And if you've never had one, you really don't know what it's like. It is sort of like that stab, like you get like you were stabbed in the throat, but
Yeah.
it's a continuous open, hole, um, exposed. And so it never, of course, like after time, like I got used to having it there, but the pain associated with it, like just that irritation, never goes away from my
Mm.
experience. Like you kind of get used to it, it gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
But again, for me, it just never fully went away. It was always there. But what about for you?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, for me, I can feel around my trach, but it's very limited. Like, I feel like I still have some nerve damage there from the initial kind of operation. And so, I clean my trach every day, or when I remember to. And I have my nurses, clean it, use a cotton swab, and Uriel has done this. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like
you can talk
saline,
about
right?
it. Yeah, saline solution to kind of sterilize the site around the stoma. And so like when Uriel does it, or when my nurses do it, I I know the Q-tip is rubbing against me, but
Mhm.
sometimes I can't quite feel it all the way.
Okay.
Can you feel the texture, like the
Um,
grittiness of the cotton, or do you
no,
just feel
no.
like
I just
something's
feel like
there?
a pressure on
Okay.
my throat from the swab. But yeah. Um and right now I've been kind of lately dealing with an issue where my trach site is just draining a lot of like mucus, and it's really irritated, and it's a little bloody too when we clean it. And so lately I've been definitely feeling it more often than I have in the past because it's irritated, and I feel that same kind of initial stabbing pain I had when I got the trach initially put in. Um,
Yeah.
Definitely not as bad, but it's similar.
Yeah, I recall when a lot of like mucus would build up, that's when that irritation would increase. Just for many different reasons, but of course I had to be suctioned to get the mucus out, and that's absolutely terrible. Just being suctioned constantly, having it go down your throat. I mean, it's a relief, like getting it out, because then it's like, wow, I can actually breathe again.
Yeah,
But it's it's traumatizing.
yeah,
Every single time, like of course, I got more used to it, and it became like my new normalcy. But again, it's still like that foreign, object. So it's not completely like I don't know, like normal. Like it's yeah, it's
yeah.
wild.
And I think I've talked about this on the podcast before too, but just the fact that the trach is like a foreign body inside of you, that alone kind of triggers your immune system to produce mucus to try and like flush it out, because your immune system sees the trach as like that foreign thing, like a infection or something. And therefore, like your body starts producing all this phlegm, all this mucus, trying to flush it out. But in reality, it just kind of chokes you because you can't breathe. There's so much mucus. And that's where like Chelsee was talking about, the suctioning kind of comes in, because I don't know about you, but I have only like 40% lung function. And so I don't have the strength to a lot of the times cough and like clear my congestion.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I get suctioned pretty frequently, like 2 times a day or so. Lately it's been a lot
Okay.
less, thankfully, for some reason. Um, I haven't been as stressed, I think, because I'm done with school now. And I think stress is a
Yeah.
big thing that increases my congestion. So
Oh, for
yeah.
sure. The stress increases like your cortisol levels in your body, which creates an immune response for your body to kind of
Mhm.
fight that off and get it back to
I had a
homeostasis. But
question, Chelsea.
yeah,
So when the injury happened, you had mentioned the physical therapy for your lungs and like breathing issues. Is that a separate injury from the crash, or
no,
was it the
so it's
paralyzation that affected your breathing, like the link between lungs and like spinal cord injury?
yeah.
Is that a
So I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that it was from the spinal injury, just where I injured my spine. At the C4 like vertebrae is where I did well, C4, C5 is where I did most damage, where the vertebrae, the bone in my neck really kind of stabbed into those nerves and my spinal cord. And I almost, it was almost completely severed. And so I think just like that all the damage I did at those two levels is what caused me to have, um, I think, like all of the the different breathing issues. And like Dom said, I'm not quite sure what percent my lungs are kind of operating at. I know a lot of my diaphragm's paralyzed because of the level of injury. I don't really have any like movement or function from like below my chest and stuff. So I can't really cough or sneeze. Like when I got COVID back in, I think it was 2021, I had a really, really tough time because if I needed to cough up like any type of mucus or secretions, I had to have somebody right by my side 24/7, or else I couldn't get that out, which would then cause pneumonia and other things. So yeah, it's really scary for sure when you get even a little cold, any type of mucus in the lungs is just like it's scary for sure. So
Yeah.
I think it was just my injury level that kind of caused all that damage in the beginning. But yeah, I did do a lot of different like breathing therapies periodically throughout the day to increase my lung capacity as well as just strengthening my lungs again.
Yeah, good question, bro. Um,
Yeah, because I've heard of people having spinal cord injuries with breathing issues after, and I know the body's all connected. You're right. So I wanted to like, okay, it's like that's like something that I'm curious about.
yeah,
That
no,
one could always do more research in, right?
yeah, and
That
like
connection.
Right.
with my SMA, it's interesting because having SMA doesn't inherently mean that you have like really weak lungs. It's just you're more prone to getting pneumonia. Like the correlation between having SMA and getting sick and like serious respiratory illnesses is really high. And so, yeah, no, I really enjoyed like hearing other people's stories like yours, Chelsea, because it kind of gives me perspective that I oftentimes overlook, being that my condition was extremely early onset. Like I've kind of grown up with SMA, and it's normalized in my mind to be disabled, to live with a disability. And obviously, my experience is very different from your experience, someone that just suddenly experienced a traumatic injury the way that you did, because, SMA is similar in certain ways to, say, like an spinal cord injury, in the sense that I lose mobility, right? Like over time, though. Like it's not a sudden traumatic experience. It's like a gradual kind of leak of mobility, of strength, of control over my body. Whereas someone with your experience, it's like a sudden, just as you were saying, change of life entirely.
Yeah. And I was 22 at the time, and yeah, I lived my whole life, without any type of physical limitations or disability
Hmm.
of any sort. And so I was completely independent, doing everything on my own, and going from that to then literally the opposite of being 100% dependent on those around me,
Yeah,
caregivers and family members is quite the shift, right?
definitely. Yeah,
It's crazy.
do you mind touching on that a little bit at this point? Can you tell us a little about your caregiving setup?
Yeah. So when I first got out of the hospital, it was mainly just like family members coming in and helping me. It was mainly like two cousins that were helping me initially, just because they had that time in their day and stuff to help me out. And overall, that went pretty well at first, but of course, after time, there was kind of that burnout with my family members. And so that's when I was looking into different agencies and stuff, and I got connected with IHSS, in home supportive services, which is an amazing agency that pays caregivers, outside caregivers, to help individuals with various disabilities in the home and stuff. And so I I got set up with that. I had my social worker and everything. She came in, did the initial assessment, and I got quite a few hours in the beginning, which was great. And so I want to say about 2 months after I had been home and my family members were taking care of me, that's when I hired my first outside caregiver. Um, and that went really well for quite a while. She was great. She had like previous experience working with a bunch of different individuals with disabilities. And I had her like in the morning time, like morning shift, day shift, so about like 8 to 5. And then I ended up hiring another outside caregiver for the night shift, which was about like right after that, like 5 to 10, 5 to 9, just to help with all my evening care and things like that. And so that was a huge shift and very different from me because I had never, had anybody take care of me before. But um, there was just a different dynamic between a family member helping out and an outside caregiver stranger helping out. Um, with my experience, I noticed with family, it's actually a lot more challenging in many different ways because of that relationship with that family member. It shifts a lot. So it's not like that person's not only my cousin who loves me now, it's my cousin who is, all up in my space. The care that I need is very intimate, and it's very like, close, and just the different things that I have to do. So it's a huge shift. It's a big change in like my privacy and my autonomy with many different people. And so in a way, this might sound weird, but I almost prefer having outside care than family member care just because of the shift in my relationship with my family members, and just kind of wanting to not put so much of my life on, my care on a family member. I prefer putting that on an outside caregiver, because it just like helps with all of the stress and challenges that kind of come around navigating the relationship and setting boundaries and different things.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely agree with you there. Something I talked about on the previous episode that we had Jen on was how I kind of manage my caretaking in my relationships and all that. And I think I had mentioned I like to kind of compartmentalize my relationships, and it's always easier when you have, I think, like you said, a stranger that is your caretaker, not like an actual family member, because if something bad happens or you have a bad experience, you can separate them as just like a caretaker in your mind, like that's just a bad caretaker. I don't need to keep them. I can fire them and hire somebody else, right? Whereas it's different if you have a bad experience with a family member, someone that you live with, that you rely on like a daily basis. You can't just fire them. Like the
Right,
relationships, the lines between the relationships are a lot more blurred.
right,
And yeah, I know you mentioned how you don't want your family to feel burned out too, especially. And I definitely hear you there. Like I hate it. And that's why I kind of talked about it on that burden complex episode. Just the burnout is a whole nother layer of mental stress kind of on, I think, us as a patient too, or the person
yeah,
being given care, because we don't want that for our family, right?
right. Yeah, and I don't want to put that like on my family members either, because um I don't know, I can like feel that stress and that energy shift, depending on how a family member's feeling or even just a caregiver. And I feel that us as like the patient or the one needing care, I feel like we have to constantly maintain like our energy and our mental capacity as well as those around us, which can be very tiresome after, a while because say, I'm irritated or mad or upset with something. I don't want to project that on, you know, my caregiver or family member, and you know, shift that energy, because then that makes that situation even a little bit more, you know, challenging to get through, whatever that may be. And so it's kind of like trying to constantly maintain the energy and the balance between everything. And so doing a lot of like self-care, self-love work is so important, um, in this community, in this world.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And that's something like I suck at, if I'm going to be honest. I,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
We
tell them
went for a
you're,
meditation exercise the other day and it blew Dom's mind. It's like, whoa, people do this? He told me. I'm like, yeah.
yeah, like Uriel kind of pointed out to me, I'm always kind of white knuckled. Like,
What's this like a term they say? Like you're just like clenching your fist all the time, just like kind of going through stuff.
yeah, it's like, what they teach you in psychology is there's these things called cognitive resources that are always kind of in your mind that take up space, cognitive space, right? And like you were saying, Chelsea, when it comes to like managing your caretakers versus like family, the burnout that occurs, it's all cognitive resources that kind of take up your what's on your mind, right? But no,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask real quick, Uriel, like I know we've kind of talked about this before and about the whole idea of burnout on the caretake from a caretaker's perspective. Would you mind kind of like touching on that?
Oh. Yeah, well, it depends on like day by day. Like if you're not having a good day and then your recipient's not having a bad day, it's like important to like kind of communicate that a little bit. Like I've always the communication is always a huge deal, and like sometimes there are some providers that are very like talkative and open, but like the recipient might not be feeling it that day, and it's important not to take things personally. I know when you tell me to do stuff, like I never take it personally because if I did, that would create like some level of friction. Then it's a little like immature to like keep onto that grudge. But some people, it depends on like the individual. But there's that little emotional like thing that you have to like balance, and also the work is also pretty repetitive. It's not well, it depends on it depends on like the type of care that's being provided, but in my experience, it's like pretty repetitive. It's not like where other jobs where like there's always going to be some level of repetition with most jobs, but like sometimes there's a little change every now and then. But it's just like, well, this medication, this many cc, okay, do this, that, and then over time, just doing that constantly could like wear you out a little bit. And especially if there's like some weird unspoken like tension between the provider and the recipient, which is why communication's always like so important and key. And you also have to understand yourself and understand the other person and understand that some nights or like some days neither person's like in the mood to talk and that's all right, you know.
Yeah, no, I feel you did. That's why I like to spice it up and like just randomly scream sometimes when you move me weird, keep you on your toes.
Dude, dude, when you do that, it scares me,
Oh
dude.
my
Every
gosh.
time, dude. It's like I can't. Are you just trying to wake me up, dude? Like
He'll
after a
just
day
be
of
like,
school, I'm like, I'm
he'll be
coming
like,
back.
he'll be like turning me in bed. And I'll just be
That's
like, ah!
Oh, dude, don't,
Man, I gotta do that sometime.
no, one of these days it's gonna be like boy call, like cried wolf, dude. I'm like not gonna react. Like stop it.
Or like when you like transfer me in in the orjo lift, and sometimes he'll put me in my wheelchair with it, and we won't be paying attention, and the top side of the lift when he's putting me down will just start like crushing my skull because it's like above me as it like goes
Well,
down.
I'd never do it on purpose. It's just
Like,
like it depends on like how you're like
yeah,
situated in the thing. You know what we should do? We should put like the little
Crushing your
foam block over
skull.
your head. That'd be
yeah, we
fun.
should.
A
Like
You're all
little
passed
foam
literally,
out,
block.
knocked out from the Hoyer lift. He's like,
I, I'm literally being like juice pressed by a machine.
We'll put a foam head, like a little foam block on top of your head. Well,
So
I guess
yeah,
that's
like
one interesting thing about our relationship is that we were like friends before.
Yeah.
So that's like a little different. Our situation's a little
Do you
unique.
guys like joke around and stuff?
Mhm.
It depends, man. Sometimes some nights I'm a silly goose, and then he's too tired, and
Every
it's
night
like
you
in
were
a
silly
reverse.
goose.
Me, no, I take my job serious. I don't. I never want to hurt you. I want to do it properly.
Well, I mean, like, I'm not saying like you hurt me or anything. I'm just saying like we generally like you take good care of me and still manage to like just goof off a little bit.
Yeah, bring like light to the situation too. That's always nice
Yeah.
to
Oh,
be
yeah,
around those that like don't make us feel like a burden or don't make us feel like, wow, this is hard work or it's repetitive or it's annoying. It's nice to be around people that are like really like upbeat and friendly and kind of help create that like light, happy atmosphere. Because this, I mean, living with a severe disability is like it's already, alone so um dark and in so many different ways. So it's nice to be around people that kind of help, make the routine, the morning routines, the evening routines kind of more fun or creative or whatever that may be. And I know like I'm responsible for that as well, but it is nice to kind of, be on that same page with that person that's helping you out to kind of make life a little bit easier and more fun.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if you've like experienced this too, Chelsea, but I have some caretakers and some nurses that when I know when they're supposed to come in on like a given day, like say a Tuesday, I'm like, oh shit, it's Tuesday. Like Uriel's coming, like hell yeah, let's go. You know? Like I get hyped when I know Uriel's
Yeah.
coming because he's my friend, A, and B, he's a good caretaker for me. So I don't have to like stress too much about stuff. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, one of my really close friends, Sam, we were best friends since like preschool. And she stuck by me through my injury and my recovery and everything. And when we hang out now, she's awesome. Like she's super helpful. Like she'll even start to like just check my water without me even asking and like check. I have a super pubic catheter. And she'll like check my pee bag and be like, oh, let's empty it. And she's super like responsive and nice. And she doesn't make me feel like, oh my gosh, like if I hang out with you, I have to help you. I have to check those things. Like it's like bringing along a child. No, she doesn't make me feel that way. She makes me feel so loved and that she's hanging out with me still, Chelsee. We go out and do fun things. And so she's such a beautiful human being in general. And yeah, I love spending time with her. And it's just great when you surround yourself with those people, you're like, wow, I'm so blessed
Yeah.
to have those kind of people in my life.
Yeah, I know. I have the same thing with Uriel. I'm gonna take a little risk here, knowing that I can always cut. Um, what do we call the urinal buddy?
the piss jug, dude. I don't know what to call it. Nobody ever told me like the medical terminology for that container that you like pee in. So I always just call it the piss jug. I'm like, so I tell them it's piss jug time. It's like, is that what is the medical here? Like I'm like
It's
almost
you.
a year in. Like here I am asking, what is that
It's the
container?
urinal. The
Oh,
urinal.
Urinal.
Yeah, yeah. Like in the
oh,
hospital, they give you a urinal to like go pee in if you can't go to the toilet. And so I have one of those that I use. So I have to like lay down, and my nurse or Uriel has to help me like use it. So yeah, that's how I do it. And he's like, all right, picking up the piss jug.
yeah.
We like to keep it light, keep it casual, like you said, you know.
I believe we met Sam at Chomp, right? She was really fun. Is
So
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The friend that was with me at Chomp was Sam.
Yeah, I remember. I guess this is like a pretty good question. I know like Dominic and I'd like to keep it lighthearted when we're working. Have you ever encountered any caretaker that became a little complacent because they got too comfortable with you, like to the point where it's almost a little detrimental, where it's like you want them to like do a great job, but like they're almost too laid back or almost too comfortable and like almost goof off a little too much.
Yeah, so like I'm somebody who like I'm very open. And I'm like a very deep person. Like I can have really deep conversations almost right off the bat. And so sometimes that's like not so great because then my caregivers get too comfortable with me and they're like, oh, well, I showed up late that one day and, Chelsee was kind of, okay with it. Not okay with it, but, kind of, they just get too comfortable and start taking advantage of me and my time. And so that kind of goes back to setting boundaries again and just confronting that person right away, once after they do something, just confronting that issue and making sure that everybody's on the same page. Because yeah, that's another hard part with like the caregiver relationship is maintaining those boundaries and yeah, being friendly with somebody, but also not allowing, someone to like walk all over me is a bit hard too because I absolutely hate confrontation. Like I will run and hide away from it. I hate it. I don't want to be mean. I don't like confrontation. I don't like problems. And so again, sometimes that gets it like I get in my own way of being able to like kind of be stern and laying like putting my foot down because
Yes.
I also don't want to like hurt someone else's feelings and I also don't want that caregiver to leave me, right? So there's like a lot of different things like almost like that fear of abandonment in a way comes into play because I'm like, oh shoot, if they leave then who am I going to rely on? Then I'm gonna have to find another caregiver and bring another stranger in my life and all my intimate care and yada yada yada. So it's like it's a lot to constantly juggle. And so um I would say just like setting those boundaries early on is really key to like the caregiver relationship.
Yes, Queen. Yes. Um, I felt that in my soul. I hate
Hmm.
confrontation too. So yeah, no, I think that's really solid advice.
I've seen Dom like manage that stuff like behind the scenes, calling like yeah, like maybe IHSS offices, for example, or like the actual like nursing companies to be like, yo, like help, right? I've seen him do that before, and just like messaging all your like
Yeah.
people to see.
Well, it just kind of sucks sometimes because of the area that I'm in. It's really not very populated and there's not a lot of like job opportunities here for nurses. And because of that, my staffing, in terms of staffing, I have no staffing. Um, I have two LVNs that work 4 or 5 nights a week for me. That way, my grandparents, who are my primary caretakers, can just chill and sleep at night and not worry about me. And then Uriel fills in the other few nights a week and even some days when, I need to go to a doctor's appointment or my grandparents do, he'll come and hang out with me. So I'm not like just chilling at the house by myself. But
Yeah.
it's just tough, like I was saying, in this area because there's not a lot of nurses that want to come out here. Um,
Yeah.
like the other, like a week or two ago, I got a call saying from the nursing company that I have, saying, and this was at like 5, 6 o'clock almost, when my nurse is supposed to come in at 10 o'clock, saying that he wasn't going to come. He had like an emergency. And so that puts me in a really awkward position because, like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Like, it is what it is. And
Hmm.
I know they're not going to give me like a replacement because, like, they
Hmm.
just never do. Um,
Luckily, I'm around, but like I'm only like one IHSS caretaker, right? You only have what, two
yeah.
LVNs and one caretaker.
Yep, two LVNs
Yeah.
and Uriel, who's my IHSS caretaker. And so yeah, again, it kind of puts a burden on Uriel because like he cares about me and doesn't want me to like not have a caretaker a night. So it puts pressure on him to like just fill in, even though he might be busy or might have stuff going on. So
Right. And like being very dependent on those around us, it's crazy how much like our lives affect so many other people in so many different ways. And just like you said, like say my mom's tired or exhausted, that affects me directly because she's the one who's going to help me get in bed at night. And so it's like, if she's mad or angry or tired, that affects me. But before my injury, did that affect me? Not on such a deep level, right? It was kind of more like, oh, whatever. It wasn't as like, I don't know, like people's lives didn't affect me as much as they do now. And so it's just like trying to balance all of that out is really difficult. And of course, there's times where, say I want to go out at night and stay out a little bit later. It's like, okay, well, like my life is so scheduled out based on time slots, right? So when I think about doing things with friends or like going out a little bit later, it's like, okay, wait, who's going to be there? How long? How much time? Who's going to help me get in bed? Am I going to be yada, yada, yada? And it's like, what? I'm 27 years old. I don't want to think about all that. I just want to like live life and be free and stay out till 3 or in the morning and not have to
Yeah.
think about all of these different things, pressure sores and, pressure relieves. And it's just like, what? I have to do what all the time? Are you
Yeah.
serious? I'm good. I don't want to do that. So it's like going from a life of just being like free and
Yeah.
independent and kind of just like doing that to like not being able to do all the things I want to do is very difficult. And at times I love how scheduled out my life is for different reasons, but then there's many times where it's like, well, I just kind of want to go to the beach right now and get in the water or,
Yeah.
do these little things that I can't do anymore. And that's where it gets really hard and trying to figure out, okay, well, if I can't do that, what can I do? Let's do
Yeah.
this instead. And trying to get like more creative with how I can release my emotions or still live, life to the fullest. And so I'm still figuring that out. But yeah, it's just like it's a lot more challenging, and it's not just challenging for me, but everybody else around me too.
Yeah. No, totally. And I'm still figuring it out myself, and I've lived with it all my life, And like I can't like just like I can't just kind of go out whenever I want. Like I have to do my breathing treatments twice a day. Usually I do them 9 o'clock in the morning and then like 9 to 9:30 at night. And if I miss my treatments, my lungs start like getting really weak and it's hard for me to breathe because I need like my albuterol treatment. And if I want to go out, if I want to do stuff, I have to plan it around like my treatments. Like I have to be able to get back to my house and do my treatments at 9:30. Like I had a birthday a few years ago where I was out drinking with my brother and some friends. We had gone to Sunstone Winery here in Santa Ynez,
I love
and
that place.
it's really cool, beautiful, really good experience. We had some wine, and then we went to the casino and had some drinks there and just hung out, played some roulette. And that was really fun. This was like a few years ago when I was like 22 or 3, and it was like the first time I'd been to a casino and all that. And it was really fun. And then I had to come back home because I needed to use the restroom, right? And like I can't just use a regular toilet or like a restroom. Like I said, I have to like lie down and use my urinal. And so, yeah, we had to come back to my house so I could go to the restroom. And then we walked into town from my house and like went to the liquor store, went to like this bar, went to another bar, a lot of drinking that day. But, I was still having a really good time and wanted to stay out, but I couldn't because I had to come back and do my treatments. And so like my brother and his
Yeah.
friends, they took me back home, but then they kept going out afterwards and like kept drinking and having fun. And like not that it's anything wrong with that, but like I'll admit I was a little jealous, because I still wanted to go out and
Oh,
do
of
stuff with
course.
them. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just kind of wanted to give my own little
Yeah.
example.
I feel that way a lot of the time. Like seeing friends that, I went to high school with or even college with kind of living their lives in different ways. And it's hard to kind of maintain that balance too of not comparing
Mhm.
myself to like others, other people in the disability community, and those that I knew before my accident too, because comparison is really like thief of joy, really,
Oh yeah, that quote. Yeah.
uh, and yeah, it'll just kind of consume you. And so just like maintaining that too, and not trying to be on social media too much to the point where it's like, I feel myself really like just being down and depressed and stuff. And so I think that's another hard part about it too, is not like comparing
Yeah.
myself to others and yeah, all of that.
So just to kind of get back on topic, I know we're kind of straying and me talking about alcohol isn't helping. Um, how many hours a day do you like receive your caregiving, and how many hours a day do you feel like you should be getting? Because I know sometimes, well, like in my experience, I feel like I should have a lot more hours covered, but I don't. Like I was touching on earlier, I just have, like the two nurses and Uriel, and that's it for like 7 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I have like 270 hours a month. Um, and so that's broken down um with a couple different caregivers. My mom is one of my primary caregivers, and then I have another gal that comes like Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 2. And so she takes up quite a few hours. Um, and then I have somebody on the weekend mornings that does that same shift, 7:30 to, well, about like actually a little less, like 7:30 to like 11:30 or 12. And then my mom is the one who comes in at night, or 5 to 10, like the evenings, and she fills in the evening time. And so she'll help with like dinner and all the different things. But um I'm not quite sure how many hours I have exactly for like a week, but after everybody like submits their hours and everything, um, I wish there was more hours in the day for just being able to like go out and do things, right? Because I can only do, so much if I go out alone, and I can only be out for so long because I need help with a lot of different things. And so it would be nice to have those extra hours to have like a companion, right? Like go out with me and just do little different things out and about, go to the beach, or, go shopping or whatever, just like those fun
Yeah.
things to do. And it would be nice to like be able to, I don't know, have extra hours or pay somebody to like do those things with me. Cause I know it's hard too, going back to like maintaining the relationships of like, I don't want to put too much on friends that I go out with. I don't want to make them feel like they're my caregiver while we're doing something fun. And so it's like, okay, wait, do I pay them when they go and do these things with me? Or like, are we on the same level? Like, hey, you're just my friend and you're helping me. And so I think that's another hard part too, because then I feel guilty. And I'm
Yeah.
like, dang, they like helped me out a lot that day. Man,
Yeah.
should I pay them? Should they sign up for HSS? Or, it kind of goes back to that thing of like, wait, so kind of talking to my friends about, hey, like, how do you feel about this? Like, are we on the same page? Are you okay with, doing a couple different things if we go out together? And how do you feel about that? So I think really just checking in with like everyone and my friends when we go out to see if they're okay with it.
Yeah. No, and that kind of ties back to like what Uriel was saying, right? Like communication is so important
Oh
because,
yeah.
yeah, like that's the prime example of that, right, dude?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's on one hand you don't want, how do I word it? It's like you'd like someone there to do things in case, as like a reassurance and make sure nothing bad happens. But at the same time, there's like that pressure where if some stuff happens, like, oh, because they're your friend and obviously they're there to help you, but at the same time, you don't want to. It just goes back to like that burden complex that Dominic struggles with so much,
Mm-hmm.
where you never want to ask for too much because
Yeah.
they're your friend and you never want to overcomplicate the relationship you've
Mm-hmm.
already established with someone.
Yeah.
Right. So I
Right.
get
And I
that.
don't want them to like view me as like, oh, when I hang out with Chelsee, it's this, and that. I want them to just be like, oh yeah, let's hang out with Chelsee like my friend,
Yeah.
right? I don't want them to like in their mind, I mean, I don't really know what they think, but I don't want them to think like, oh, well, when I hang out with her, there's all these things I have to do. So maybe I don't really want to. Or, maybe not today because of that. And I would
Yeah.
hate that my injury and my care would stop somebody from hanging out with me. And I don't know if that's more so a narrative I've created in my own mind, or if people really think that or friends really think that. So that's really hard. I for sure struggle with that literally every day.
Oh,
Yeah.
the human mind is crazy. It's like
Oh yeah.
it's like a prison, but it's also like freeing at the same time. It's like,
I
oh
know.
man.
I know. Going back to meditation, I really want to start to meditate again. I took a I took a class at Hancock and it was awesome. Like we meditated every day, well, every class, in the beginning and the end of the class. And I really started to get into it. And it actually helped out a lot. But again, it's that kind of that thing of like forcing myself to do something new and something that might be really hard at first, but I really want to get back into that.
Yeah. One of my kind of go-tos, I was telling Uriel this yesterday actually, because we were talking about like how stressed I can get just worrying and thinking about the podcast and wanting it to go smoothly and like go well. I was telling him something that kind of calms me down is, or something that I like relate to is this lecture given by this philosopher. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. His name is Alan Watts, and he has a lecture he's really famous for where he talks about that like critical kind of voice in the back of your head, that voice that kind of tells you and I that our friends may not want to hang out with us because of our disabilities and like the level of care we may need if we do go out with them. That critical voice, it's a really good servant, but it's a really bad master. And that's something I always kind of find myself thinking about. Yes, I want my friends to be able to go out with me and like us just enjoy our time together. But at the same time, they're my friend because they made the conscious choice to like be around me and accept me for everything that I am,
The way
physically,
that you are, yeah.
mentally, emotionally. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that being said, like there's still times where, not necessarily with friends, but more so with caretakers specifically, that you have to have those like tough conversations with them and be able to like fire and hire because it's like a business really, right? Like you're your own boss, you're your own manager of your care. So I was just kind of wondering, like, what advice do you have for people that need caretakers? What advice do you have for people that need to find new caregivers? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier is setting those boundaries right away, like right in the beginning. Maybe even writing out your care routine and also like kind of all of what it encompasses and like what you need. Um, and just going over that and making sure that they fully understand your care routine and kind of your expectations for them and making it very professional, and just letting them know right off the bat like what's not acceptable, and if they like cross that line, just being really strict with that and letting them know like, hey, that's not okay. um and maybe even like how jobs do like write-ups. I wouldn't say like, oh, 3 write-ups and you're fired, but kind of maybe similar to that, like, maybe if they do something once that that you may not like, or something, just letting them know like, hey, um I didn't like that. I don't, I just, that can't happen again. And if it does, I will be looking for, another caregiver, and just kind of letting them know, not being too harsh, because again, that can also cause further issues, but also not being too friendly to where, they can and will walk all over you. And so I think just, yeah, just writing out your care routine and your expectations and just making sure to check in with your caregiver every week. Or like whenever they come, every Tuesday or every week, just check in with them and make sure that, they're there for the right reasons and that everything is running smoothly, and just to make sure that you are on the same page as much as possible.
Sounds like solid advice to me.
Yeah, well, especially if they mess up, it makes it complicated because of like the physicality aspect of it, because you are um disabled and placed in like a different kind of power dynamic where you don't want to be
Right.
you want to come off too bossy or like to this that because you don't know how they'll react, and that's always like a fear. Obviously
Mhm.
they're never supposed to like do cause any harm to you, but there's always that fear at the back of your mind, and I'm pretty sure Dominic probably has a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And well, especially when you consider the fact that we talked about earlier, we always have strangers coming into our lives for the most part. Like,
Mhm.
you don't know. You may think you know, but you probably don't know the person that's like coming into your home to like the full extent that you may would like to know, right? And
Yeah.
that's why like when back in I think it was last October or September, it's been almost about a year since Uriel started working with me.
Almost a year, right?
Yeah,
October, right?
yeah. I um I felt I could trust him because he is my friend and he's such an empath and he cares so much about the people in his lives. Like I was already comfortable with him kind of taking care of me right off the bat.
Yeah.
And I literally had like no other options at the time. My like I said, my grandparents are my primary caretakers during the day, and they're like the backups when my nurses call out or if somebody can't come during the night. Like worst case scenario, I'm not alone, like I still have my grandparents. But it's not ideal for them to like have to care for me during the day and night. And so what happened like last end of September, early October was my grandmother, who at the time was doing a lot of my care, came down with a staph infection. And she was getting like these epidurals for her back pain. And I guess one of the injections that she got gave her the infection. And like, no, it went kind of undiagnosed for like a week or so. And it got really bad. And she couldn't walk. And she was bedridden in the hospital for about like 5 months. And so when that whole process started, I had, one less caretaker. And so that's when I called Uriel to come over, like as just like a shot in the dark to see if he would be down to come help me out, like at night when I needed him to stay over, sleep on the couch, whatever. And so it worked out for both of us, right, dude? Like that whole process.
Yeah, because at the time I was working restaurants and I was working at a particular restaurant that was a little the management was a little abusive, and I just had worked in restaurants for 2 years and I just wanted out so bad, and then it just all happened kind of at the same time. And then I'd been doing it for a few months while your grandma was recovering, and we discovered that IHSS had up to like maybe 3 or 4 months of back pay. And I think it was your grandpa that
Yeah.
initially like had mentioned like, oh, you could get paid to do this. I'm like, I guess I could. And then we looked into it and it's like 3 months of back pay. I'm like, whoo, I mean, that's about how long I've been doing it, like unpaid. So it all worked out.
Yeah. And thankfully I'm not really in a position yet where I need uh another caretaker. Like, would it be nice? Yes. Is it like absolutely necessary at this point? Probably not. And so Yeah, Uriel's awesome because he's super reliable and he'll just kind of show up for the most part whenever I need him to. But
Yeah.
that being said, like, how do you think our relationship has changed since this all started? Uriel.
Uh, I think it transitioned from like friends to best friends, almost reaching levels of like a family intimacy. Well, everyone has like different like family dynamics, right? Like you might like there are some cousins you're really close to, and then some not you're not really. So maybe just best friends, better friends with some intimacy, but like not like that, you know? I don't know.
It's strictly
Yeah.
platonic.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. It like creates that like a different type of bond, like that closeness of like feeling safe and secure within that relationship. Like as you mentioned, it is intimate. It's almost as close to like a romantic relationship as you can get, I think, with like those type of like caregivers. And so it's really, really cool. And I've never really had that type of kind of bond before in that type of way. Like I've had best friends in the past, and it honestly comes pretty close to like um that caregiver relationship. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So like what do you guys think are the pros and the cons of like working with a friend, I'll say, like as a caretaker?
One of the benefits about working with a friend is goes back to what you were saying earlier, where well, because you guys are friends, they're more likely to be there because they actually care about you, and you're not starting from like zero. You know that person, and you know that like the chemistry is like pretty well, and like it's a little bit more lighthearted than if you start with a complete stranger at like zero and you don't know anything about each other.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like that you already know that person and kind of know who they are um as a person and how they kind of take care of themselves and others. And so yeah, I just feel like it's almost like you can trust them 100% compared to a stranger that you're just getting to know. Because, like you mentioned earlier, Dom, you don't really even know that person, like, you know what I mean, behind closed doors. Like, you only know kind of like a part of that person and what, you know, they narrate to you and kind of like what, you know, what pieces you get from them during that time that they're there caring for you. But at the end of the day, you don't really like know that person as well as you may think you do.
Yeah, you only know them as well as they want you to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like with mine and Udi's relationship specifically, I feel like I know him pretty well, obviously, and he knows me very well. And so we've kind of talked about this dynamic we have where I kind of am I'm a go-getter and I'm always like wanting to be busy and working on something. So in that sense, I kind of push him with me, all right, to like keep up with me. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, he'll pull like an Uno reverse card and slow me down and give me that perspective that sometimes I would miss
Yeah.
otherwise.
So you guys really like balance each other out and complement each other
I like to think
in
so.
different ways. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we're coming to the end of the episode here. Any final thoughts, you guys?
Oh, I had a question that I wrote down here from like the very beginning because I was
Yeah.
curious. Um, when you had COVID, you needed 24-hour care. Is that just because of the severity of COVID, or is it whenever you get sick, it's kind of like a uh-oh, like red, like code red kind of thing where you have to plan accordingly to get that care you need? And how do you balance that?
Yeah, so Thankfully, I've only been like really sick like that once in these 4 years, with my spinal cord injury. And so, at the time, I did have a partner, and he was amazing. He was like, at the time, like he had more of an open schedule, and so he was able to like pretty much like be by my side 24/7 throughout like I just had a really bad week, and after that I was okay. And so during those like 7 days he was there by my side, and he was kind of like my main person at the time that was doing all of my care throughout the whole day, helping me cough and helping me like clear those secretions and everything, like because my caregivers of course weren't coming in because they also were sick, and so they were trying to, you know, um, heal themselves and um, stay away from me. So, yeah, at the time, I was just really like thankful and blessed to have him in my life, and he really helps me through that. So, yeah, that's the only time I've been that sick. Thank God. But yeah,
Okay. COVID was like particularly scary for like a lot of people, especially like the
Yeah.
medical field like that. It's terrifying. Imagine if like half your care staff just like can't pull up because like you have
oh
COVID.
yeah,
And it's just
because
like,
all
man,
my other caregivers at the time had COVID too. And so they were like, hey, like, I can't come in. And I was like, oh, shit. What am I going to do? I was so terrified because, again, it's like, I still have to get out of bed, do my bowel program, do all these different things. And it's like, okay, obviously can't do that on my own. So who's going to help me? And my mom ended up getting pretty sick as well. And so she was in her bed, and I was like, oh shit. So thank God I had my partner at the time that really stepped up, and he was sick too, but it didn't really affect him as bad as it did for my mom and I. And so yeah, I was just really thankful that he was there to help me throughout that time.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that's definitely like an episode that we want to touch on in the future too, is just the nuances, not just of typical like platonic relationships, but like dating with a disability as well. So
Yeah.
there's your plug for that. Stay tuned. It's coming soon. And
Hey.
yeah, I think we'll kind of end it on that note. If you liked what we had to say today, then please leave us that rating. Please consider writing a nice little review of the episode of the podcast, and be sure to share with your friends and family. And I'm hopeful that the main takeaway from this episode is that these patient caregiver relationships that we talked about today, they're not so cut and dry, and they can be very nuanced and complicated, right? So we hope that that message is loud and clear. And if you're not already, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Disability Myth. And we are on YouTube as well at The Disability Myth. So, with that being said, you know the drill. Peace and love, and may the force be with you.